Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second episode of the Cognitive Bias podcast. I'm Alex Sterner, and I'm here with Alex Bryce, and we are proud to welcome one of our favorite strength coaches, Dan John, to the show today. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing good. Cognitive bias. Now that is an interesting. That by itself would make a good podcast. But let's stay with what we talked about. My gosh, yeah.
Well, our initial idea was to call it Fireside Chats with Dunning and Kruger, but because they're both alive and well and pretty still involved in academia, we figured, you know what, let's not worry about that, and let's have a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek name where we can explore some topics that we know a lot about and a lot where we don't.
And your listeners know what that all means?
Oh, we're trying to get them up to speed. You know, if they don't, I'm sure they will soon.
So, gentle listener, let's see, Dunning was the major professor and Kruger was the student. And they began to notice an interesting thing, and then they actually studied up on it, right? They actually did a little test where when you first get involved in something, you think you're an effing expert, like the 14-year-old bodybuilder, or the guy who's been playing, the ninth grade football player. And the deeper you get into a topic, and by the way, Socrates said the same exact thing, the more you know you don't know, which is, in the fields I'm in, religious studies, strength and conditioning, performance, people wonder why I sit in the front row on things. It's like, because I don't know anything about this topic. And it'll be like, well, the guy quoted you. I get that, but I don't understand. I don't know. I'm still struggling because I have a vast library in my home of strength and conditioning. I read everything I can. And yet, when somebody asks me, sometimes I'll ask a question. This is what's always helped me. I read this years ago. An expert on nuclear arsenals was speaking to a college classroom. A little girl raises her hand. Little girl, 20-year-old. When you hit a certain age, wouldn't it be just easier if we just got rid of all the nuclear weapons? And I guess he just went like this. If it was only that simple. Her point was exactly correct.
Right.
Exactly. There's no question about it. But to implement what she said is the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's something that we try to be aware of as much as we can. I certainly remember, being a college student thinking that I had a handle on kinesiology, and then left, and it was sort of like, oh, I don't know jack. So definitely looking forward to hopefully someday getting a little higher up on that bell curve.
Yeah. It's the idea the martial arts have something called beginner's mind or something like that. I mean, it's nothing new under the sun. Every tradition comes up with it. In fact, now that I'm kind of a codger, when I listen to those young bucks with their marijuana cigarettes in their hand, it's like, I know you know everything, but trust me, man. You're going to take a left turn one day and just go, oh no, I'm exposed. Hans Christian Andersen fairy's tale of the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I constantly say that, in my life, I've watched people publicly get exposed, like the emperor. And I've felt many times like I'm one small piece of underwear away from it myself, It's good. It's good. And thank you, both Alexes, for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's get right into the meat of it. What initially instilled an interest in strength and conditioning for you?
It was good. I looked at that question and I thought, and I got to tell you something. It might have been Chutes and Ladders. So the Chutes and Ladders edition I grew up with had a young man. I think he was either drinking milk and eating a sandwich, and it was a young man, and he had pecs and his shoulders were good and he wasn't chubby. And this is the truth. This is the truth. And then when my brothers came home with that Sears barbell set, and I've got it up here in my notes. I've got they had the figure lifting weights was slender and had shoulders and I mean, this is 1965, guys. This is 1965. So For reference, I don't think either of you were alive. For reference, not a lot of people had heard of Vietnam basically yet. Well, it was kind of a little bit, but not like it would be. Johnson's the president. And I just fell in love with it. And I started just kind of gobbling up whatever I could in the field. I loved weightlifting. You know, my daughter's a teacher now, and she says every so often I'll have a student like you, Dad. And it's like, oh, please be something positive. And she'll say, you know, somebody that just, you know, there are certain, usually boys, who will be like, once they found the place where they can just, if I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, okay. And to me, that's been the thing I love about strength and conditioning and performance work is almost throughout my whole career, it's been, it's a journey, you know, look, the alphabet. So first we do A, then we'll do B, and then we do C. Now Z is a long ways away, but I always loved about what we do in our field is that at least you can see, even though you can't see necessarily Z, but you can see the next step. You know, when you're lifting weights, you first bench 100 and you're happy about it. You're in triple digits. And then you bench 200 and then you lift 100 and go, why couldn't I have done that? That was so easy. And then you get to 300 and you look back at 200 so light. And it just, you just slowly, and it's step by step. I don't want to say linear progression because rarely in life is anything, I mean, it happens, but you know, but if you do, I can sit anybody down in the world and say, okay, you have this thing you want to accomplish. Here's a toolkit that we have from strength and conditioning. And if you stick on this path, and we have to make changes, we have to do this and that, but we can get you, considering your genetics and geography, you know, geography is a big factor, you know, not a lot of big wave guys from Kansas, you know, not a lot of great wrestlers from Hawaii, you know, but if your DNA is it right and certain things work out, we can get you as far as we can towards your goal. And it's really, you know, it's kind of delightful. I can sell that message. I'm certainly no overnight, you know, 40 days or 3-week guy. I'm certain that I will never do that. But man, we can, if you had given me time, I could have turned that Titanic, you know.
That's great. That's fantastic. And with such a deep, you know, passion for something like this, this is the question that I really want to get into. And there's a lot of specifics that we can definitely mull over. But considering that you put so much effort into this, you read about it, you've had so much time to experience different contexts of strength training. How do you always keep your approach so brilliantly simple? How do you always find that way? It doesn't have to be this new bell and whistle. It doesn't have to necessarily be the flashiest video on Instagram. And we love it. A bunch of your protocols, you know, we grew up trying. We're like, oh, this looks simple, and it's brutally difficult, and it's effective for the exact, change or adaptation that we're looking to elicit. How do you keep it centered on that after, you know, being in the field for so long?
So here's the problem you have, Alex, is I have to go behind the green curtain over here because there is a truth here, is that I've done so many stupid things. You'll notice I don't share a lot of the idiocy I've tried. You might notice that. See, I notice it. You know, people say like, Dan, you talk a lot about, you know, the 1991 season. You don't even talk about 93 and 94. Yeah, they didn't have them. Years don't, you know, what about, you know, Dan, what about 1980, 1981? Those years don't exist. 2004, I have everything going. Okay. But okay, we'll stop on that. So yeah, I do things that are stupid. And the one thing that's really, really helped me a lot, both Alex's, is this. So this is my 2004 journal, and this is my 2020 journal, okay? This is my current one. And one of the things that's really helped me, and this is that by keeping journals all the way back to 1971, is I can see those rhythms, and I talk to myself. If you can't watch, but in the back here, when I change over to a new journal, I always try to make little lists on the back where I say things that work, things that don't work. And then when I start a new journal, I paste those in. I type them up and I paste them in.
Interesting.
And one of the things that's nice about that, well, let me just look here. What we got would be something. Oh, that's actually a really good idea. Yeah, well, that's really good. So on this one here, when I was trying to improve my technique as a Highland game athlete to help my discus throwing, I came up with this little chart, and every week I would just try to make sure I checked in every one of those Highland game drills that I thought would help my discus. And it's just a simple little, and then I made a big thing, and I could either cut and paste it in there. With this one, you guys don't mind this, do you?
Well, no, this is great.
Yeah, please show us more.
Sure. And on this one, I have right there that's my pirate map. That's my daily to-do list. Get a good night's sleep, wake up and be grateful, do 1 minute meditation or longer, eat 8 different vegetables every day. And on this idea, this is the ideas for nutrition that I'm going to try in the year 2020. Okay, nothing fat. Fiber, veggies first. Fish is your friend. I decided I need to eat a lot more fish. So there's a couple. Let me just bounce around a couple of things. First and foremost, folks, I've made a lot of stupid mistakes. I think I've actually done some damage to athletes. I don't think I ever did anything permanent, to be honest with you, but I overtrained a lot of them. We did too much. I didn't have a good enough system to plug them into. But in my defense, it takes a while to build a system. It takes, you not only do you need to know, like for example, the discus, I knew what to do to get somebody to throw a discus for, but I didn't have a system. I didn't have names for it. And now my system is stretch, 1, 2, 3. That's the discus throw in my head. And then I build exercises. Stretch is when you start. 1 is when the right foot comes off. 2 is basically when the left foot comes off. And 3 is the throwing position. And then I break this throwing position up into A, B, and C. And so I can talk to you on the phone if you're one of my throwers, saying, listen, in fact, when you guys called, I was helping a thrower with the smallest video I've ever seen in my life. And basically her problem is she's blowing through 3B, which is very common because she's not getting the discus up in 2. Well, she understood everything I just said.
Interesting.
You got to get the discus up in 2 because you're blowing through in 3B. And so as you're first trying to put things together, you probably have good knowledge, but you have to take yourself back to, okay, I'm guessing the 3 of us all know geometry and algebra, right? The 3 of us, right? Mm-hmm. But for us to learn geometry and algebra, we had to learn, and then you go back, and then you go back. So we had to learn how to count. Then you had to learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then you basically you learn some forms. This is a sphere, this is a square, right? And you probably play around, and then we built on it. But what happens sometimes in any field is that you come in and you forget that you had to learn to count first. So when I work on things, I try to work in 2 directions at once. So with my move, let's talk about weightlifting for a minute, okay? So it took me a better part of my career to come up with the sentence I'm about to say. Push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry. And then this way it goes planks or isometric learning, traditional bodybuilding movements, anti-rotation movements, and then the high-speed ballistic stuff. And so I have a little chart called the movement matrix. I think there's 37 exercises on it now that so if Alex here blows his tricep off in his rehab, but he can never really lock out his right arm again, we can still train him at a high level with loaded carries, that exercise I have where someone does a set of squats followed by a sprint, prowlers, and then maybe his upper body work is simply push-up position planks and suspension trainer as best as we can get him to work on it. Okay?
Okay.
We might be able to keep him in the NFL 3 more years with the inability to ever do a bench press again because we've done it. So, but it's because we have a system, and when you have a system, you can progress, you can regress, you can correct, you can, for example, I think every year an elite athlete should spend about 2 weeks probably doing, reminding themselves about tension. So that would be planks, the goblet squat, or any of the squat family is a full body tension. The overhead squat is a full body tension. Farmer walks teach you tension. Bear hug carries, pick up 100 pounds and bear hug it and walk. So every year I come back to about 2 weeks of reminding them about what tension means in the weight room, because at the highest levels of performance, you're trying to bleed arousal and tension. You're trying to get that down, because the Super Bowl brings you all the arousal you need. You need to bring it down. So you need to have this system that moves in certain directions, up and down. And then the final part, if you don't mind me, the third part is I have these 2 test tubes in my mind, and it's basically cost to benefit ratios, okay? So I grade everything that comes in. So an A grade, and by the way, use Pareto's law on this. Okay. If something only takes 20% of our time, but gives us 80% of our impact, I give that an A grade. For me, that would be like in my personal life, that's royalties. Royalties from books. I get royalties from books I wrote almost 2 decades ago. Okay. Well, I mean, what did I do? Well, I worked hard a long time ago. So for me, in my business, I'm always looking for royalties, because that's an A, okay? For me, if you know how to do the Olympic lifts, the snatch, let's just, if we did the snatch and the overhead squat, we call that the drill, the drill, snatch and overhead squats. That honestly could probably keep most athletes at that 80% range of performance by themselves. So we give that an A grade, you follow? And then there's water in, water out. Those would be the B grades. And that's your 9 to 5 job. That'd be like when I used to have a 9 to 5 job. That was my 9 to 5 job. That was being a strength coach at a school, or being a track, my working job. Mm-hmm. For me, that's what the power lifts are. I've noticed that what you put into the power lifts, you get out as an athlete. There's a top end on the squat, and there's a top end on the bench, and there's a top end on the deadlift. We're getting stronger, doesn't carry over. So I give those kinds of things B grades. Okay. So when people ask me about nutrition, I would call, it's a joke and it's funny, but fiber is the ultimate B grade. What goes in, goes out. Okay. Perfect. And then here's the answer to your question. And then new stuff comes along. Now, in my world, that'd be like somebody, you guys offer me to do a workshop down at your place. Okay, I get on a plane, I come down, and it's great. I talk for 3 hours. It's nice, but it never happens again. To me, that's a C grade. We put in this much, everybody, and we got out this much, and that's pretty good. By the way, C grades often end up being A grades. So you should be constantly looking. So for me, when Larry Draper said, would you mind if we compiled these and turn it into a book? To me, I thought I would get a bunch of books to give to my athletes when they graduate from high school. It turned out to be a bestseller. So that went from, that sounds like a good idea, to being life-changing, okay? Somebody comes along to your gym and they, maybe Dynamax shows up and they got the med ball. And you've been doing med balls for years, but they show you one little med ball drill. And all of a sudden, your athletes go, that's it. I get it, coach. I understand now how to use my hips. Wait, you understand it? And little Eddie over there, the idiot in the class, oh, I get it too. You get it. Oh my God. So, and then the fourth thing is what I call F grades. That's when you put in a lot of time and energy, you don't get jack back. And by the way, I do that with relationships. I do that with business entanglements. I grade them. And I have certain companies that are A grades. Larry Draper is an A grade. Dan John University, my relationship with Brian, A. But there's been some Fs, and I've had to fire them. So I don't work with that company anymore, because I do a lot and I get very little impact. So you're asking, what has this got to do with making things simple? I used to do it clearly once a year. In fact, it would be great if we had the assistant coaches, and we would say, all right, we tumble every Wednesday. In our system was tumbling day. And so the students would have 2 tumbling sessions a month. Okay, tumbling. And the assistants would say, A. Really? Oh, yeah. The athletes, they tell you it feels like a football game. Our soccer players are bouncing up. The number of shoulder injuries has crashed. Real tumbling, because I love it because it's fun to coach. Tumbling. So tumbling became an A grade. It's something we added as kind of a, let's do this on Wednesdays because we only have an hour. Let's just toss this into the bin. We did kettlebell warm up and tumbling. And it turned out to be one of the most important parts of our sports conditioning program.
Interesting.
So something else comes along. Let's do something I know I'm going to give an F grade to. Burpees.
Yes, excellent.
Burpees. Royal Burpee is the name of the person who invented the burpee. And he said you should do 4 and let's just see how you move. And then it became a cult. But, the burpee, I've never had an athlete say, coach, the difference between this year and last year is those burpees. Every time I line up at wide receiver, I like to throw myself on the ground, do a push-up, and then sprint down. And so you sit back after a while, and all of a sudden you start to pick out. So push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry are those are the, and then the 6th move is everything else. But when we were just kept culling and cleaning things up, and we came back to, we had vertical and horizontal push and pull. But the problem is when you looked at it, it gave so much overemphasis to the upper body, and it was killing what the messengers was trying to say, is that great athletes are built from the ground up. You might not, the guy who looks good on the beach very often isn't a very good football player, but the guy with the big hamstrings, big butt, big traps, big spinal erector, big calves, he's the one that hurts you and leaves you hurt. Might not look good, walking towards you on the beach, but he's going to scare you walking away. And so we decide, okay, let's just say push and pull. Hinge, squat, loaded carry. Those are the focus. And technically we go up. I usually say the biggest mistakes you have no loaded carries. You have no authentic squatting. Your hinge work needs to be done better. You're not doing enough pulls, and you're doing way too many pushes. So if I could redo one thing, I would have done loaded carry, squat, hinge, pull, push, in that order down the page. But then that'd be too much work, and I'd have to spend the better part of an hour fixing that. So that last one, I hope you caught on to it, is when you have a system, then you can start looking at judging what keeps. But on the other side, you also have to be going, okay, listen, we're going to start doing these prowlers, and these prowlers are great. Because we're doing prowlers now, we don't need to do as many back squats or something like that. We're getting that work here. We'll throw you got to put, when you put something in, you got to have the ability to pull something out. And that's when I know you're working with a good coaching staff, is when, by the way, keep what you threw out on a piece of paper somewhere so you can come back and put it back in later on when you went, why did we get rid of that? What were we thinking? So you have to, so for me, making things simple is actually an intellectual process of can I regress it and progress it? In fact, let's even go higher. Is there a language that, is there a graph or a language? Stretch 1, 2, 3, push, pull, hinge, squat. Do we have a system of looking at things first? And then once we have a system of looking at things, do we have a way to assess it? So language, system, assess. And you're going to throw things out that you are going to be wrong about. And that's when I think the title of your podcast here really comes in. We made an intelligent decision to get rid of this, and we were wrong. And we were wrong because, and very often good athletes will give you the feedback. Yeah, that's what you have to do. And that's when you need that's when you need good relationships One of the things I never charge for coaching as a thrower, but the only thing I ask is, after you retire, you owe me a letter. And in the letter, I ask you, tell me what works. And not one time have I ever gotten a letter that has been about the system. Usually it's about the life lessons. You're not good enough to be frustrated.
Oh man, what a quote.
Yeah, I tell that to my athletes a lot. I'm sorry, you've been doing this for 3 weeks and you're frustrated. So let me tell you about the time I threw a winning throw out of bounds and my whole life crumbled before my eyes, and it took me about 6 months to recover with that. That's frustrated. You're just having a bad day. So, was that helpful?
No, that was fantastic. And I mean, I think it does a really good job. We've been big fans of your work for some time, and we've noticed the depth to the simplicity for a long time, but it's beautiful hearing, not just, when we read one of your articles or something, it's very rational. It makes a ton of sense. And it resonates with us, but it's really cool hearing it from this perspective, because this, now you're really illuminating how you came to that conclusion. And it also, back to the, the original question, when I compare it to a lot of the things we see on Instagram and stuff, when you're working within this system that you've developed, that's why you keep it simple. It's great.
Well, there's that one I did the other day I did a YouTube video on the fold versus the hinge. Yes. And I've been spending months thinking about the fold, and I realized that even if I explain it, I still need to make sure people understand the hinge so that they can have. So even though I was going to talk, I wanted to talk about the fold in the video, and I realized once I got to the right place, I really didn't need to, because the drill was going to make it very difficult to fold, yeah, that's good enough. But sometimes, you have to get so elegant about something as simple as the hinge. You have to have so many drills and so many thoughts so that you can make it. And again, I like the fact that you say it's simple, but at the same time, you got to realize that to make that drill, the magic drill, is so simple when people do it. Think of how long it took me to put that together. And you take this piece and you take that piece, and you're frustrated and you go, God, I just can't come up with a way. That's why the regressions and progressions are so important, because it allows you as a coach, very often too, and then to see that gap that you had in your coaching. So we have a good step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 8, 9, and 10. Oh, wait a second. We go from, glute bridge, the hip thrust plank, and then the next exercise is the kettlebell swing. So that to me is 1 to 10. And what if someone just can't instantly pick up the hinge from that? Well, you need to fit them into a nice place on that nice little path to the swing or the Olympic lifts or whatever. And very often people jump that, and it becomes difficult. And that's where you get, I wouldn't say you get a lot of injuries, but you get a lot of frustration when you could have easily dealt with that, in a bit more systematic way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on something. I wrote it down as you mentioned it before. Coach Bryce and myself are big on, we enjoy Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
But through some of our experience now coaching, and you'll see this divide all over the place, right? Is it worth the steep learning curve? As people who spend so much time in the weight room, who know how to do it, I got my USAW years ago. I love doing them myself, but sometimes, you've got those athletes, talk about keeping something simple. I think teaching somebody who has no strength training experience, something like the barbell snatch it's a mountain of a task sometimes. So are there ways that you will, get a similar adaptation out of an athlete, or have you just developed such an effective and easy to communicate, easily digestible system around those movements that you're going to find a way to tackle that with the athlete anyways?
So the correct answer here is yes. It's absolutely yes. What you said, yes. Now, Now we have to do, let's plug back into a system. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, let's just walk through, if you don't mind, let's just walk through. So do I have an athlete or do I have a normal person and everybody else a general pop?
Let's go with an athlete.
Okay, good. So already you've already changed the rules right there. So we just said 99% of the population we're not going to talk about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what you just missed. If I'm talking about general population clients, I don't bring up the Olympic lifts.
Interesting.
Because that's not something the vast majority of them are ever going to need or do. So now we slid over to active athletes, or what I used to call aging athletes, but people hate that. Every athlete, by definition, is aging. So if you're a 12-year-old discus thrower, you're aging. Okay. The clock is ticking. It is. I mean, you say that to people, and you're like, well, that's kind of mean. Yeah, okay. Call me in 15 years and say, tell me if you're not 28. You know, it's pretty true, you know. And if I'm working, so now you got to put it into other sets of numbers. If my athlete I'm dealing with is 22, which I consider, once you're 20, if you're 22 and you're not making a living in your sport, you're an amateur.
That's great.
And it's cruel, but it's true. So if you call me up at age 26 and you're late in your NFL or NHL career and you say, Dan, will you help me? I'm probably not going to do the Olympic lifts with you. There are other tools in the toolkit that are just as good as the Olympic lifts for that person. If you call me up, you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, I'm going to spend a great part of the off season teaching you how to be an Olympic lifter. And ideally, I'll have you compete on the platform. And this is something I picked up from teaching at St. Mary's there in England, is that when you're on my students, when I first lecture to them, don't have any idea what the hell I'm talking about. And I love them for that. They will say, well, so isn't that the Prilipin tables that says I should be able to do a double with 95% of my lift. And I'll just laugh at them. I go, what maxes are you guys talking about? You know, me and my buddies, we go to the gym and I bench 100 kilos. Well, that's not your max. Well, yeah, that's the most I've ever done. No, man, your max is when someone walks up to you at the Nationals Cup. Can I swear in this podcast?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, because I'm quoting somebody else. If I make this lift, I'm national champion. If I miss, I take fourth, okay? All right? It's a lot of weight. And my wife walks up to me before the lifting and says, you know, we couldn't afford this trip. I go, I know, honey, we're struggling. She goes, no, we don't have the money. I go, yes, dear. And she leans over and goes, make the fucking lift. The head judge said he'd never seen anyone sprint up to the platform before. Make the fucking lift. So what Dan Cleather, my boss at St. Mary's, does is he insists that the students compete in an Olympic lifting meet as part of their master's in strength and conditioning. And we run it. The night after that meet, I almost always have another talk. And I said, do you remember what I said about maxes? And you'll hear this. How much arousal did you have on that third attempt? And a hand will go up. And there's this one young lady, she's got this great accent. She says, H. So H is H. I love her accent. And she starts talking about all the physical things that were going on. And we're talking about imagine a system in your body and it was reacting to her max lift. Her tension level. She says, I've never been so nervous in my life. I could see my hands trembling. And I go, so when you talked to me the other day about maxes, and the whole class goes, we're not, they didn't say, but we're not worthy. Because to understand the arousal and tension levels needed to do a max Olympic lift teaches you a ton about actual sports performance. Mm-hmm. And then most of them, I said, I see no value in percentages at all. Last week, they all disagreed with me. The night after that, they all agree because now they understand what does percent mean? Percent of what? I like Jim Wendler's idea of percent. You take what you think your max is and minus 20%. I like, to start a framework. I like that. What you think it is and then minus 20. So when I'm going to work with the Olympic lifts, I'm going to use that as a tool for superior performance in nearly any sport you have. A sport like springboard diving. One of my guys is a national coach of springboard diving. And,
Interesting.
And he talks all the time about how the Olympic lifts can be used to help them divers understand the tension level of pounding off a board. And there's no surprise that the Chinese divers are very good Olympic lifters. Mm-hmm. In American football, once you've snatched, if you snatch body weight, literally that means I can throw my opponent over my head, and so I'm going to leave a hurt on them when I tackle or block. So, and now there's that fuzzy area. I learned the Olympic lifts at 18, so I still think there's value for the elite athlete from 18 and above. Once I cross that threshold, when the person is either a hobbyist or a professional, then that 22 age, and I'm picking 22 only because of the American system. That's the American system. When you hit 22, basically, bye-bye. Then that's when I would, I still might teach the Olympic lifts if someone wants to learn them. Someone say 35 who wants to be a Highland gamer, I would tell them, it'd be really worth your time. Because, as a Highland gamer, you have at 35, you probably compete another 20 years, so enjoy. So you, again, what you just heard is even though I didn't maybe explain as well as I should, there is a system for even something as simple as when should you Olympic lift.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Every student I ever taught in high school knows how to Olympic lift, power lift, could probably pass a kettlebell cert without much training. They know original strength. They know tumbling, hurdles. I really spent a lot, of course, I would teach them the basics of the strength and bodybuilding movements. But they all know how to Olympic lift. They all know how to power lift. They all know how to tumble and do basic gymnastics, because I thought that was very important. Lifetime. That's
great. I actually want to piggyback off that real quick. And you circled back and clarified a little bit. But I also wanted to sort of give an introduction as to what we're about. So our target demographic, we're really carving out a niche within combat sports with a big focus in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we also train a couple, UFC, various MMA fighters. And when you were talking there about the Olympic lift, something I wrote it down as soon as you said it, right? When you first said, if you're 22 and you aren't making a living in your sport, you're an amateur. And for most, I even then wrote down combat sports versus Olympic sports. In many Olympic sports, or in a lot of the more mainstream sports that you'll see in the US, I can't argue with that. That is absolutely, Coach Bryce and I interned in a Division I weight room when we were at the University of Connecticut. That resonates, and really seeing how experienced and developed some of those guys are at 18, 19 coming into a program. Absolutely. Now, the crazy thing is, it's been a crazy juxtaposition going from a very well-refined Division I system to these fledgling sports like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. And it's pretty crazy sometimes how you've got these developing athletes who are, in jiu-jitsu, they do tend to still skew a little bit earlier, but MMA, because there's no youth MMA program. It's not like these guys have been, competing, nationally, internationally from a very young age. They'll sort of piece together a bunch of these other combat sports. So it's different. And the development, their ability to learn, to be a sponge. The greatest athletes will still have that, but plenty of them do not. Do you, a question we had on here, have you ever worked with combat athletes? Fill us in with that.
Yeah, I work with I've worked with a couple of UFC guys.
Okay.
I still do. I'm currently, and it's weird because my advice to them is to do the easy strength protocol.
Okay.
The 15-minute workout, where you pick basically 5 exercises, and that's what you're doing for the next 40 days. You're gonna, for a fighter, I would say military press, weighted pull up, Well, a deadlift. I would love a thick bar deadlift on the first go around to teach good technique. You can't have bad technique and do a thick bar C grip deadlift. The weights will just come right out of your hands. Ab wheel or something like that, and then some kind of loaded carry. Thank you very much. Do that for 40 days. The one guy I trained, it was kind of funny because he was in this really big time fight. In fact, he got a bonus for the best fight of the night or something like that. And he could not believe it. He used to get his grip ripped. Mm-hmm. After 40 days of thick bar deadlifts or whatever we had him doing, it was like, no, it ain't coming out. And so when you're talking about fighters, the mistake fighters have is, you know, and I like Ken Shamrock's book, the original book, the Inside the Lion's Den. His recommendation was bench press, high rep squats plus squats. He had a clean and jerk in there that didn't look very good, and a curl. I thought that was just fine. And of course, all that tumbling, and he had another name for leapfrog, scrambling. He had scrambling, he had tumbling, and then he had these basic lifts. And I looked at that back then. I mean, we're probably, I don't know, early 2000s when Enter the Lion's Den came out. Do you guys know the book?
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, right, early 2000s-ish? Is that
yeah, right around there, yeah.
I looked at that and I thought, actually, this you know, this is the kind of thing I like. And what amazes me is that once that workout that shall not be named showed up in fighting, you guys went from being on the right track to just more shit, you know, more shit same day, you know. Yeah. And just more shit ain't going to make you a better fighter. It's going to hurt you.
Right, just volume.
Yeah, I mean, you're already getting all the volume, you know.
Right.
And you know, like my guys, they're working with the best, you know, they're working with the best and brightest, but then they go in the weight room and they do more. And you know, you hear all that. What is it? Perfect is the enemy of better, or something like that.
Best is the enemy of perfection. Or sorry, good is the enemy of perfection, or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. You know, and what happens is instead of just doing a strength program that gets them stronger, they try to do conditioning and more conditioning and more conditioning, and then we'll do more conditioning. And most of the time they leave it on the mat. The one guy I worked with, it was funny because I was getting, a buddy of mine is a chiropractor, but he also does tissue work. And I was recovering from a tissue work thing. Someone had taken out my femur and stuck a metal rod in there. I was born with a condition called pistol grip hips, and so I've got titanium legs. And he was just doing some work, and he said to me, well, you know, what about it? So his next client was a fighter, and the fighter said, do you mind if I just listen in? He came into our room, because I went to a whiteboard, because that's all I ever do. And I started talking about, you know, arousal levels and tension levels and heart rate, and you got to be where you need to be. And the young man told me, he goes, you know, here's the thing. Every time I'm on TV, I don't fight as good as I fight. It's the worst fights ever. I go, so, because I already knew what the answer was. Are you ready? Okay, ready? I asked him, okay, on a normal training session, what do you do? Well, I go to the gym, roll around a little bit, and then I work out. And what do you do when you're on worldwide television? Well, I show up there about 6 hours early, and I do mobility work with my mobility teacher, and then I spend a few hours in meditation, and then we do tissue management surpluses, and then we do anaconda overbearing teeth monkeys, and then and he kind of stopped and looked up and went, "Wait, do you mean I'm leaving it in the warm-up room?" I said, "You said that, not me." Next fight, you know, sometimes in UFC, if someone get hurt, and then they ask for someone to step up, you know, that happens quite a bit. This is 2-3 years ago. So, well, there's not enough for you guys to figure out who it is, so that's good. So he shows up, he rolls around a few minutes, kind of shakes his head, and it's like, you know, only had 2 weeks to prepare, so, you know, he wins the fight. Massive upset, massive life-changing event for this young man's financial career.
Interesting.
And the reason is it's all this stuff we're talking about. It's he finally decided to fight in a match as he fights in the dojo or the wrestling mats or the web, whatever. And I think of all the people I've worked with, that's probably one of the two stories. The guy with the easy strength with the big financial payout because he got fight of the night or whatever you guys call it, and then the other one was the guy who realized that the track and field approach is better than what he was doing.
Yeah, if we want to talk about a brilliantly simple template, the simple strength one certainly would fall under that category. And you hit the nail on the head right there in terms of building that sort of system around how these athletes should be training, both in the dojo and outside. And I think there's a lot of overlap here of the things that we're encountering on a daily basis of how are we building that structure, getting buy-in for building, being able to manage that arousal level, being able to get buy-in on building tension without just this more conditioning, constant volume. And that's something that we're really working to try to build in real time to be able to leave the sport better than we found it. And I think there's some great topics that you touch on there.
And then, there's some things like, for example, let's just go real simple. Let's do a couple simple standards for what I would consider for a fighter. You should be able to clean and press your body weight. You should be able to do a double body weight deadlift. So when I work with guys, within weeks, they say, well, I got my double body weight deadlift. I go, well, good. Your hinge is strong enough. What about that clean and press? Oh, man, I tell you, that clean and press. Yeah, I know. I know. If I said bench press body weight, you'd have had it months ago. But there's a weakness there, getting that body weight up. And here's the funny thing: you weigh 145. There's nothing on the bar, for God's sakes, I'm not so sure about pull-ups but I would say a weighted pull-up with a load that's appropriate for a certain number of lower reps, like a 3 or 5 at the most. Farmer walks, being able to walk double body weight and just make up a distance. It doesn't matter. But the idea is once you get those guys to that standard that everybody who fights out of Hurricane Monkey Dragon Gym is at, then we don't worry about the weight room anymore. Your problem is you don't know how to do an escape. Your problem is you don't have a good takedown. Quit blaming the strength coach for your crappy fighting.
Yeah, that one resonates as
Absolutely.
well.
One of my favorite articles that I remember so both of us actually wound up being introduced to you from T Nation. And one of my favorite articles of yours was about anaconda strength that we'll touch on in a second. But one of my other favorites or first ones was the 10 things every lifter should be able to do. And that very strongly resonated. And we've worked over the last few years to try to set up a lot of those sort of standards that you just discussed right there, a double bodyweight deadlift, carries for time, things along those lines. And, we've seen, I love your definition of that anaconda strength, being able to build that tension through your entire body. We talk ad nauseum about how important isometric strength is for positional retention in grappling. One thing that we have struggled a little bit to be able to figure out is how can we integrate, Olympic lifting variations in that regard? Because as you've said, they're so fantastic for building that concept. You're constantly dealing with technique issues, injuries to the shoulders, neck, etc. So that's been one piece that we've had a little bit of trouble fitting into our system. And it's interesting how you've integrated that successfully.
But Alex, you might not be able to fit it. That's just the reality. So, you've got a guy who's new to weightlifting, but 10 years of fighting, his injury history, it might not pay off. The guys that look like Gollum, the guys with their injury history. Now, here's the thing. Training them to be an Olympic lifter and getting them to be more mobile and all that might be great for their life, but it might destroy their fighting career. Yeah. So you have a better, healthier athlete who sucks on the mat. So you have to kind of mentally, you have to sometimes sit back and say, oh, well, it's like, this came up just the other day again. This basketball coach wants his teams to have more ankle mobility. And the intern asked me about it. I said, I can't think of a stupider thing to do for a basketball team, because you want to basically have casts for ankles, because the harder you drive in the ground, that's that Coach Newton, the famous coach, Isaac Newton, very good coach. The harder drive that left foot in the ground, the more rebound I get back up from the earth. Well, if I have ankle mobility, that means that's going to bend. And then everything that moves, all that slop up, is going to take away from my top end jump. And so you might have a healthier athlete, but they're not as good. So you made them more mobile. Their FMS score went to the roof. The little test you made was better, but they're not as good anymore. You've literally trained yourself to be worse. And that's the whole strength and I don't like what I'm about to say because I don't think it's true, but that strength endurance continuum, you know, if everybody on your team can run a marathon, your American football team, that's impressive. You'll be really good at the end of the game, but you're not going to have a chance to win. You can have everybody on your team bench 6, squat 7, and deadlift 8, but you're going to have other problems because, on the first play of the game, there's going to be some damage happening. But the third play might be I don't like the continuum. I don't at all. But it helps us understand that in strength and endurance, we have to make decisions. And when it comes to things like mobility, the Olympic lifts, flexibility, we also have to make decisions too. We have to be able to sit back and go, this, loosening up Bobby's shoulders might make him a better Olympic lifter, but ruin his ground game. Or whatever.
Yeah, it's like you said before of every time you add something to the system, you have to be able to sort of take something away. And I don't know who I heard this analogy from. Maybe it was you because you're so utterly quotable, but I like to imagine each athletic variable sort of being a bucket. And we can't fill every bucket, but if we can't have them be empty either. And if we're at least making sure that, we're sort of hitting those minimums without being able to overflow any particular bucket, that's when we really get our athletes performing the way that they need to be.
Can we just riff on that for just a moment? Because when you said it, I thought you were going to use the Tony Robbins buckets, the financial security bucket. So the first bucket is your emergency fund. And when you fill that $1,500 that you'll need for broken water heater, new tires, minor emergency, once you fill that bucket up, the next bucket underneath it is your debt. And as soon as you're debt free, that starts spilling over into what I call my fortune fund. That's the yacht I'm going to buy. I already own 3. I don't even want to get into my private jet collection, but strength. But until you fill that emergency fund, don't worry about debt yet. And when you get debt done, then start dreaming. I think both of those, Alex, are good metaphors for looking at what we do. If you don't do push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry, let's not yet talk about anti-rotation work or ballistics in the gym. Let's get the loaded carries in before we talk about the Olympic lifts. And before we talk about the Olympic lifts, make sure we have a symmetrical athlete. And then so maybe that third bucket, I'm just riffing off what you said.
Yeah, I love it.
Because, so for me, maybe, if they're not doing authentic squatting and loaded carries, then let's shut up right now. Let's take care of that. Goblet squat and farmer walk. Thank you very much. Do suitcase carries. Thank you. Bye-bye. And then once you pour over a little bit, then you can start looking at standards like that double body weight deadlift, the clean and press body weight, the other things, and is the person symmetrical on both sides? I thought suspension trainers were the stupidest thing I ever saw. When TRX first came out with that, they sent me one with a DVD. I'm watching the DVD, like, this is stupid. And then they came to the one arm row with your heels together planking. I thought, okay, that's why we buy these. So the nice thing about, if I have my heels together, my knees are together, and I'm doing a one arm row, and on the one side I get 5, and then my shoulder pops up, and on the other side I'm perfect for 15. I have an asymmetry in my pull. And until I deal with that asymmetry, I don't want to add ballistic to it. So I don't want that guy doing the Olympic lifts. If I can, like, for example, guess what the beast is? The beast is the 48 kilo kettlebell.
Yes, we have one.
Okay. When I was at San Jose, lots of witnesses saw it. I did 13 presses with my right arm. Okay. Wow. With my left arm, I can only do 2. Having said that, okay, fill in standard joke, I was single a long time. Okay. your guy's going to work with me as an athlete. Every time you see me pressing, you should constantly be saying, you should be telling me that the reps on the left side should dictate the reps on the right side. If I do 8, I should only do 8, because you want to build up my symmetry before we add the snatch and clean and jerk to it. Now, if I'm a discus thrower, if I'm a javelin thrower, if I'm an arm wrestler, yeah, there's going to be asymmetries. It was Socrates or Plato who said that discus throwers should throw with their left hand. There's nothing new here, to have symmetry. But you make a deal with the devil in those one-sided sports that, when you hit my age, you're going to have to go out of your way to deal with asymmetry. But when you Olympic lift, like with the snatch, that asymmetry could cause so much stress on maybe the spinal column, but certainly the joints. You see guys, they'll snatch with this arm over here, and this arm is just, and then they catch it overhead. It's twisted, tons of pressure on the rotator cuff. Ow, I hurt my shoulder. That's on us for not having the buckets. Alex, this isn't bad. I've never thought of this before, ever. But this is a good way to think about this for what you guys are doing. The fundamental human movements, then the standards and maybe some asymmetric work, and then talk about the Olympic lifts. And if those other 2 buckets aren't full, don't talk about the Olympic lifts yet.
I like that.
So I think I want to sort of jump in on this. I think you might have just touched on why we've sort of gotten away from it a little bit. The more and more we've worked with fighters, the more and more we find, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but even if we just look at an MMA fighter, right? Yeah, we've got some of these incredibly athletic exceptions. These guys who can switch stances fluidly and they can fight. They can use their right hand as a power hand or their left. But even in those scenarios, you'll notice that when they're going southpaw, they've got a slightly different set of weapons. Fighting is extraordinarily asymmetrical, and especially so for the more orthodox fighters, the ones that don't switch stances, the ones that have found something that worked, they stick to their very limited tool belt, and they get very, very effective at forcing guys to play that game with them. And I think what we were running into was the fact that, ourselves, because we started much, much younger and dove into Olympic lifts and studied as much as we could, we loved them for ourselves. But I think with a lot of these fighters, what we found is like, hey, we can train triple extension in other ways, and we don't have to deal with that catch that you were talking about, because that fighter has somebody cranked a joint lock and their external rotation on their left shoulder is far, far, greater than what you'll see on the right side. And what we started to do is we took those composite parts, and we're still looking for similar adaptations, but doing it through a heavy bilateral, but very dynamic movement like you'll see in Olympic lifting has its host of problems with an extremely asymmetrical athlete. And that was another thing that I wrote down as you were talking. I mean, I think it's wonderful how when you're talking about something like discus, I mean, it's that you can just look at that and go, okay, well, that's clearly asymmetrical. So what about that rabbit hole with symmetry? What about the fact that some extremely proficient athletes display these wonderful asymmetries and sometimes thrive in them? I mean, Usain Bolt is a great example. I know there's a lot to unpackage there, but I think that how exactly do we deal with that? And when do we stop chasing our own tail with those asymmetries? When is the asymmetry more like the ankles in the basketball player,
Let's go through it. Do you know I have a book on how I assess people. It's called Can You Go? How do I assess elite athletes? How? 3 words. Can you go? I don't care about anything else. Now, I had a person listen to my Now What talk, and they were like, so you would let an athlete with a clear injury compete? Well, yeah.
If they can go.
I mean, I felt I couldn't answer the question. It was like, well, I'm going to swear again. Sorry, gentle listener. Well, fuck yeah. My sophomore year, I had spent at college, I had spent 6 years of my life getting ready for this event. And I pulled a spinal erector. And you ever hurt a spinal erector, it's a rough injury. You can't sleep. And, you know, I had this, my butt cheek was just purple, you know, because it kind of, that's where it drains out, you know, whatever it is. And I had to sleep like my leg up like this. It was awful. And I showed up to this track meet. And it was obvious I was in a ton of pain. And I threw 6 throws, and it wasn't the best event of my life. And not letting me compete, it was completely out of my mind not to put on the jersey and step on the field to play. I hadn't slept well in days, man, days. I had nothing, I had no nervous energy. But if you'd have told me I couldn't compete, I would have had strong words with you, probably appropriate words. You know, the day of the Super Bowl, coach, I don't know. You never hear that.
Right.
And I get it if you're like some keyboard warrior, but man, you know, I lost the Highland game one time, and that weekend I decided to do this thing called the velocity diet for 28 days, which basically is only 6 protein shakes a day. The reason I did it was because I wanted my brain, I wanted to reboot my brain. And so all I had for 28 days was 6 protein shakes a day. I'll tell you one thing, no one beat me the next year because I had reprogrammed my brain. And people go, why? Wait, I don't understand that. Well, if you don't understand why losing by 1 point doesn't crush you, then I can't explain why you have to do something like the velocity diet.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to be normal, get the hell out of my life. Normal. No one I work with is normal. So right next to me is the altar. It's all the stuff I get from my friends in special forces and all the memorial things. And there's a lot of things up there from dead people. And it's like, those guys aren't normal. Elite athletes aren't normal. I mean, you know, I didn't drink in high school, didn't smoke dope, didn't kiss girls, didn't do anything. That's not normal. But I had this goal of I wanted my education paid for as an athlete. Junior college, I even went stricter. You know, I made up for it in college, don't worry. But, you know, it's not normal when, you know, you leave the academic campus at 1:30 and you don't get back until 5, and you show up in the cafeteria in your training gear because otherwise you'll miss dinner. You don't have time to shower. That's not normal, you know. So can you go is all I care about. Can you go? And there's I'm going to give you the other 2 words. After competition, we have the conversation, now what? That's 2 of my books. What? Can you go? And then now what? And now what I talk about, where was your arousal level? You know, where was your head? Where was your tension level? Where was your heart rate as best as you can figure it out? And then what we try to do is have an intelligent conversation about next time getting your arousal level where it should be, at a level it should be, and your tension level at the level it should be. That's why that guy rolling around, who just rolled around for that big televised event, he said the strangest thing is my arousal level was always so low because going into the fight before his old way, the 6-hour warm-up, because, you know, but I was so nervous about doing so little, I was ready to go. And I'm looking at him like, yeah. So in other words, you're telling me you're ready to go. And the funny thing about athletes is you have to use the parrot technique with them. Yeah, it's the first time in my career felt great. So it was the first time in your career you ever felt great. And what did you do? I did this weird thing where I just rolled around. So you did this weird thing that got you ready, the best you've ever done in your career. So what's weird? Weird are we going back to the way you used to do things? Yeah.
Are we seeing a pattern here?
Yeah. Every time I drink 14 martinis, I don't remember the 15th. Yeah.
I want to touch on elaborate a little bit. Let's you keep bringing up a lot of these sports psychology terms, you know, arousal level versus tension.
Oh, no. I'm no sports psychologist.
I'm aware, but I want to know about your integration, your approach. It's something that you said that you bring up with your athletes all the time. I want to know how do you tiptoe around like staying in your lane, but also bringing up these topics that are extremely important when it comes to an athlete executing?
I have a friend, he's Coach Steve-O. He's got a sports psychology degree. And he said that 5 minutes with me taught him more about sports psychology than all the courses he took.
With you?
Yeah, because if you're going to be a head coach, you are a sports psychologist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, no, I am in my lane because tension is what we teach in the weight room. Tension, relaxation. You know, Bud Winters, relax and win. You know, you've got to bleed off the tension levels. Then you raise them up with deadlifts, and then you figure out that as a discus thrower, I don't want to be at the tension level of a deadlifter, and I don't want to be the stone guy in the hot tub. I need to be somewhere in an appropriate place. And then arousal is just his twin sister. So what I do with arousal is I try to find much of my training with elite athletes. You know, repetition gets you there, but situation makes you win. So we practice like in the discus throw, you just get one throw. Now you get 6 in competition, but it can come down to the last throw. My daughter, Lindsay, won the state championship on her last throw. I won the nationals on my last throw. We have another one of my athletes, foul, personal record, state champion. You know, because we train, because what you do in the one throw competition trains the arousal level. And you learn to go, okay, to throw a personal record, I can't be as excited as I think I am. I got to do a little, I got to bring it down. So when you're working with fighters, and this, I always tell these guys, work on situational stuff. How do you lose? And the one guy was candid. It's like, very often I feel much better after the guy punches me in the face, because then I can gauge, okay, I took that punch. That's not as bad as I thought. Folks, those guys are interesting to talk to. So what you do then is then you talk to them. Well, what if it was worse? And then what you might want to do is then bring in, have a conversation. You can either do it as a conversation or set it up as a drill where the person then deals with it. If someone, I'm out of my, with you guys. Can I talk American football maybe?
Of course.
Please.
Okay, so one of my favorite drills for coaching high school, it's called the 3rd down and 15 drill. It's 3rd down and 15. If we get the first down, it's 3rd down and 15 again. If we don't, we send in the punt team. What we're trying to practice is I want the quarterback to know that any series that ends in a kick is okay. So first I want that, and I'll be like this. I'll say, that's fine. Hey, it's now it's 4th and 8. We gain 7 yards. We push the ball forward. That's what I want. Punt team, and then the special teams coach goes, we only have 9 guys on the punt team. Then we find out the 2 idiots who can never remember they're on the punt team. We get rid of them. We find 2 people who can remember. And then they punt, and then it's 3rd and 15 again. And we practice 3rd and 15. If you want higher arousal, you go to the 2-point conversion drill. Guys, we're down by 1 point. I think we can win by 2. We're going for 2. We got 25 seconds, 24, 23. Play number 1, 2-point conversion, play number 1. Play number 1, 22, 21, 20. And you count it down, and then they run. If we fail to get the 2-point conversion, then I come out and I got my head down and I do this thing where I go, I just want to thank the seniors. You've been great leaders. For you juniors, I hope you learned something today about how important. And, everyone kind of look at you like, what are you talking about? I go, oh, do you want me to do this at the playoff game, or do you want me to do this at practice? I could take it. I'm just practicing what I'm going to say to you guys after you guys lose the playoff game. And at first, everyone thinks you're a psychopath. But you talk to anybody who's ever played high school football, they can probably tell you the last play they ever played.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, you can either sit around 30 years from now and laughing about being state champion, or you can sit around 30 years from now going, I so wish I would have practiced just a little harder. And so that to me is what when you said sports psychology, I don't want my athletes sitting in a room bitching about how Alex makes fun of him when he wears underwear. I don't want that shit. I want real-time sports psychology. You can ask my wife, man. She's been there in the stands with me when I'm watching an athlete fall apart at a track meet. I remember one time, and I don't want to go too many details, but it was like, I honestly have nothing to say. Tiff, what I'm going to do is I say, he had a great career. Just watching this poor person just fold, and you had a great career, and the lessons you learn from high school sports are going to carry you so far in life. At the state championship, her junior year, my daughter lost her opponent. Lindsay went into the final in first place, and her opponent beat her. Her senior year, we're going into the finals. Her opponent goes ahead of her. And I'm just going, let's see, last year's talk was, there's always next year. What is this talk going to be? By God, if Lindsay doesn't step up, last throw, best throw, breaks the school record, breaks her lifetime best by a lot. And it was like, oh, thank God she paid attention during those drills. Because we had practiced that kind of pressure. We had practiced, what are you going to do at the state meet if someone goes up on you, 1 inch? What are you going to do? Go, well, woe is me? Are you going to start crying? I mean, let's practice it. So you practice special situations with your elite performers. And I don't think that's sports psychology. I think that's coaching. And and coaches have been around a hell of a lot longer than the psychopaths, okay? The word coach comes from a carriage that has 4 wheels, and its job is to carry you from A to B. That's what a coach is. Mm-hmm. We are transportation vehicles. My biggest job as a coach is to constantly slap my athletes and say, no, this is the road we're going to be on. Quit looking at the squirrels, and we're not stopping at McDonald's. We're not stopping at Taco Bell. We're going this way.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite quotes of yours is, the goal is to keep the goal the goal. And that's something we talk to with our athletes on a very regular basis. We just are on the other side of Pan Americans, the only major jiu-jitsu competition that happened this year due to COVID. And man, if we had $1 for every athlete who came in a week from the biggest competition of the year and said, okay, having to focus on the wrong goals, the wrong things, wanting to set PRs when they should be focusing on sport-specific situational drilling, and it's so hard.
I know. By the way, that originally comes from the mission is to keep the mission the mission. Oh, interesting. I heard that from 2 different places. One was from a military command. The mission is to keep the mission the mission. So Marines are very good at go. They're very good at go. They're attacking. But when you have Marines doing working in a daycare because they're in country and you have nothing else for them to do, the mission was to defeat this enemy. The mission is to keep the mission the mission. And then it also comes from the division of churches. The mission is to keep the mission the mission. And so I changed it for us to the goal is to keep the goal the goal. And the hardest thing you can as a coach, you'll have someone come up and say, I want to be the state champion in the discus. Where were you last week? Oh, I was, I hurt my ankle playing church basketball. Very common here in Utah. Oh, really? So the goal is to keep,
Yeah. No, and I think you did a great job with it. That's sort of what I was hinting at when I was talking about staying in your lane and stuff like that, because we have to wear that hat. If we don't touch upon some of those subjects, how are we going to have true transfer from the things that we're training them with in the weight room? And something that I really like to focus on is the fact that with a lot of particularly combat sport athletes, something I talk to them about is, composure is a skill. And you've got this thing in wrestling, which we don't work with a ton of wrestlers, but I grew up wrestling myself. And there's this thing that embodies that perfectly. It's almost like a tradition at this point, particularly in the US, where regardless of what happens, you scramble out of bounds, you run back to the center. You're dead tired. You just scrambled for 30 straight seconds. and you sprint back to the center. I mean, objectively, it's a waste of energy. It makes no sense. Walk back to the center, but you do it because when your opponent sees that and they feel how tired they are, and they see that you are just expending extra energy to run back to the center and look them square in the eyes, that tells somebody something. And something that I really try to reinforce is, in a combat sport, it does matter that you stay composed and that you don't show how tired you are. Of course you're tired. You're in a fight. But the ability to keep that poker face can really have powerful, potent effects on your opponent and how they perceive you to have this, this gas tank that is seemingly endless. So I think it's really interesting how, as a strength coach, it's not just about the technique on these core lifts, that we're really trying to get transfer, and how I love how you keep on bringing it back to arousal level, and especially with, the sports that you yourself have specialized in. It's brilliant. If you never work on that with them, that's a skill as well. Being able to perform when you're at the arousal level where you've got 2 faults and you have your third attempt, and it's either you make it or you go home and get that sad speech. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, the phrase that comes up is fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have my athletes practice certain things, practice certain ways of moving and standing. If you defeat me, you'll never know how much it bothers me. Because I will be just like this when you defeat me, because I've actually practiced. I have an act that I put on. And if I win, you won't be able to tell if I've won or lost, because I actually practice that, because I think it's very important. I don't want to, in any ways, ever publicly shame an opponent. I won. It's thanks so much. It's really been an honor. If I lose, thanks so much. It's really been an honor. This is great, and you practice that, and then I will celebrate. If you've had a chance to be with me. It's a lot of fun, or it's horrible. But the idea is that, I'm not a big fan. I mean, in your sport, you've got McGregor, who does a lot of that showboating, right? In our sport, in track and field, it doesn't really help, because there's always someone better. In football, I always say, don't put a bullseye on your chest. I know this: if you humiliate me on the next play, I'm going to hurt somebody on your team. I'm just going to. Someone's going to get targeted. Oops, So you got to. So I'm a big believer in actually practicing acting. It tend to be acting. And the nice thing is about fake it until you make it, is if we do that thing where we didn't get the 2-point conversion, and I fake the whole "I'm so sorry" thing, the athletes will laugh because they'll get it. But then all of a sudden there'll be this weird little, he's right. All right, heads back up. Let's do it again, or let's do the drill, and that's how you make it. And I get it. And, in your made-for-TV events, I get why you do all that nonsense, but I think long term you don't want to,
I agree. And I think in combat sports, there's sort of a pendulum swinging. Somebody like McGregor, has done such a good job of being charismatic and selling out his events and everything. But now you've got this contrast of these quieter, humble guys, the true martial artists, as opposed to a showman. And I think it'll settle back. Not everybody has that spark to be as charismatic as McGregor anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's who you truly are, well, be true to your own compass. But boy, I tell you, you're sure throwing a lot of gasoline on your next opponent. You're sure lighting them up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing about staying in your lane, I try to stay in my lane with a lot of things like nutrition and stuff. But nutrition, if you bring a nutritionist talking to your team, very often they can't answer the questions from elite performance, because it is so different, and when they hear me say things, if you decide to, you got to lose 15 pounds overnight for a weightlifting meet, that's on you, bro. We often make performance often gets in the way of health and longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And but here's the thing. All the travel I had, all my education has been paid by me throwing the discus. I'm not going to trade. I mean, I've got all kinds of physical issues. I'm fine. But I mean, I got stuff. And I wouldn't trade. I had a nice conversation with a young lady named Sarah today from England. She goes, "Do you ever regret it?" I went, "God, no. I mean, I've seen the world. I mean, I've got a great education. I've got a very nice life, all because I threw a discus far, So yeah, you have to, and that's a hard thing to get across to, I hate to say this, a normal person, a normal dietitian, a normal psychologist. Yeah. So you got, you see, 15 concussions, I think, I can't remember. So, and you still want to play. Oh yeah, hell. Wait, but that's bad for you versus what? Well, and you can always tell it, when you got an athlete, it's that whole thing that poor little listener on my YouTube channel didn't understand. Is like, we're not talking about normal people here. And we haven't been since I asked you the question.
Mm-hmm.
And until you kind of throw your arms around that, we are a different world. I don't know very much about nutrition, but I know a lot about sports nutrition. I don't know a lot about psychology, but I know a lot about what it feels like to fail on a public stage and what it looks like to overcome the odds and win. That's different than, did you like your mother or what's I'll say a word and you tell me what, black, death, white, death, So yeah, I guess we should stay in our lane, but the athlete needs that. The athlete needs it, and I'll help them in any way I can. When I'm in Europe, that phrase comes up a lot. Dan, you shouldn't talk about nutrition. Really? Any athletes want to improve? All the hands go up. What'd you have for breakfast? Okay, let's talk.
This has been fantastic. Let's change gears just a little bit before we wrap things up. Okay. Got a question on here. What's one of your favorite things to do outside of strength training?
Oh well, I like. Most people don't. I'm a big fan of murder mysteries. I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, Nero Wolfe. I like well-made. There's a nice new Poirot that's on. Well, actually, it's the ABC Murders. It's got John Malkovich, and I thought that was just brilliant. And it's with Poirot, Agatha Christie. There's another new edition of Ordeal by Innocence that's on Netflix. I thought that was brilliant. These are 3-hour plus, adaptions are very good. This new Enola Holmes that's out, it's on Netflix, I thought was just brilliant. My daughter watched it and, she loved it, which I think is high praise. Let's see. So I like murder mysteries. I like watching murder mysteries. I like good movies. I do like to play chess a lot. We're a big Yahtzee family in this house. We also have outdoor Connect Four, and my wife and I like to play. We picked that up at the Caribou. Shout out to the Caribou and Tuco's Taqueria in Galway. We started playing Connect Four on a rainy winter day in Galway a couple years ago, and so we now have really nice versions here.
Wait, how do you play that outdoors? I'm not familiar.
Oh, it's a big plastic outdoor one. It's huge. It's the size of my desk here, yeah. And it's just a Connect Four, and the kids love it. My grandkids love it. The adult kids love it. It's just a great outdoor game, and you can see it from. I mean, everyone convinces. They'll walk out and go, no. So, but it's. I mean, the green and yellow circles are probably that big each. I mean, so that's fun. The usual stuff. I love spending time with my kids. One other thing like James Bond books and stuff I like a lot. The movies not so much. I mean, I certainly like Daniel Craig and a lot Sean Connery, but you could probably throw the rest of me. Well, Lazenby was great. What else do I like to do? I don't know. I garden a little bit. Where I live, mint grows really well, sunflowers and tomatoes. So I like that. I'm a pretty normal guy. I like American football a lot. College.
What's your favorite team?
In college football, my wife's a Ute, so I cheer for them. Utah State Aggies. Often the Pac-12. I'm a big fan of Dabo Swinney. I think he's a very good and decent man. So I've been a Clemson fan before they became Clemson. I heard Dabo Swinney talk one time. I'm like, I like this man. He's a good and decent man. So those would be the teams. I like Oregon on. I think the head coach at LSU, because he just cracks me up when he talks. There's certain teams I don't like. I'm a big fan of the academies, Air Force, Navy, Army, very much, because when I was coaching high school, I always kind of would follow what they did, because they have I've only taught at highly academic schools, and let's be honest. I mean, if we didn't have a Republican administration, one of the top names up on the more moderate side is one of my former discus throwers. My doctor is one of my former athletes. My lawyer is one of my former athletes. My mortician is one of my former athletes. So, and I've got my former athletes are all over the nation. So I used to think of myself as, I'm a very big believer in the student athlete. So that's why a lot of my programs are an hour long, because I would make deals with these kids. And the funny thing is, later they'd say, I would go home and train on my own because I thought it helped my grades to throw the discus for a while. That movement meditation, and it's kind of cool. So I have a lifelong love affair with the sword and the stone. And so you see, this is, by the way, I'm buying some of this guy Nolan's art right now, but you can see I got a sword and the stone behind me, and then I got coffee mugs here and everything else. And if you read my Wandering Weights, every week I'm doing a paragraph by paragraph study of the sword and the stone, using my insights from religious studies and history and travel and my ability to look up words to make it a better journey for a lot of people. And then the final thing is, when my girls were little, my wife Tiffany would read to them a chapter every night of Harry Potter.
All right.
And now my grandson Danny has started reading the first book. So I do have a strange relationship with Harry Potter, because it was such a delight raising my children. Waiting for the movie to come out, waiting for the next book. Oh my God. I didn't go to sleep when 7 came out. And we were getting ready to go somewhere, and Tiff goes, "We've got to go." And for those of you who know Harry Potter, it's Snape's pensive is when I had to leave. So I had to leave in the middle of Snape's pensive. And later, when they all read it, was like, "Oh, I can see why you didn't want to go." I can see why you didn't want to. No, really, just one more minute. So I don't know, that's me in a nutshell.
No, that's pretty good. And that sort of leads me into the next thing. I mean, I like how you sort of started to hint at, being a student athlete and that balance. And I see a lot of that expressed even on your Instagram posts. You'll have like this little blurb that you throw at the end sometimes, which, I think one of the big things that resonates with me is finding that balance. There's plenty of other people in fitness who you're getting the opposite message from. There's no hint of balance thrown in there. And I think that's awesome. I've heard you mention a couple times religious studies. I mean, how does that play into balance? When did you start to really dive into that? Paint the picture there a little bit.
Well, I got my first master's in '82, and then I went to the Middle East right after. Not long. I had to study intensive Turkish up at Portland State for a while, and then I went to the Middle East as a Fulbright in '80. I think it was '85. I'm pretty sure it's a while ago. And while I was there, I kind of started realizing that and it's very simple. I started noticing things that the basics of teaching religious education: tell a story, show a picture, ask questions, memorize something. That's kind of the basics. Like, if you can't read, but you go inside of a Catholic church, you can just look at the wall and pick up much of the story. If you have any kind of religious background at all, I could start a song and you'd start singing along with me. If someone doesn't know where Jesus was born, I could sing, "Oh, little town of," oh, that's right, that's right. And so, and I began to notice that, and so I got interested in that because in my own teaching career, I had begun to pick up that we were losing a lot of kids because we were, and I'm a big fan of reading, obviously, but we were losing a lot of kids with issues who needed to get back to the tradition of seeing a picture and memorizing something. Well, that got me on a journey. I picked up a master's in religious education later on, and then my wife saw this job in the paper one day, and she said, "You ought to apply." And I started teaching, and it's interesting because about a year after I started teaching, I got a call from the mothership, and they said, "Would you be interested in teaching online?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And they said, "Yeah, we're thinking once a year, maybe 20 students will be able to take a course online." And I was like, "Wow, okay." So here's the funny thing. I've never taught the course one time online. The first time I ever taught it, I taught one, then I taught two, then I taught three, then I taught four, then I taught five. Then they hire other professors to teach the course, and we've been as high as N. So, religious education 101A, 101B, 101, we've been as high as N. I think I'm the 5th online professor in history.
Wow.
When I first taught online, I had to send my students Adobe Acrobat to download with instructions so they could open a PDF.
That's great.
We take it for granted now, but.
And then many of my students, it was boing, 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 boing. It was dial-up. That was their connection.
Oh, wow.
So you had to be very careful. So you really couldn't use online resources. But once they got into the school, then the server was inside the school. So in a sense, the student and I were in the same bucket, if you will, the same place. And we could have a discussion, or I could answer simple questions if something came up. And it's weird because, when I first started, there were no cameras. They're like, we're talking right now. It was just bone slow. I had students who couldn't figure out how to do email. I always joked that I got the job because that was the only applicant who had an email at the time.
Wow. Interesting.
I can tell you my first 2 emails. The first was to Rob Wolf, and the second was to Clarence Bass at Rob Wolf Paleo. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then, people used to post things, and they would leave it with they would post something, and they would leave everyone's actual emails, and you could go back and mine people's emails. A friend of mine got an email, a joke thread, and went backwards up it, and it had John F. Kennedy Jr.'s email in there.
What?
John, the one that died in the plane crash, famously.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so that's how things have changed a little bit online.
Yeah.
Security's improved a little. So
yeah.
that'd be the short story. I've always thought of myself as a fairly broad, academic. I've always been fascinated by myth. I don't like when people say myths or stories that aren't true. The myth, the easiest way to think about it, mythology is the why of things. Religious studies is the why. So 5 sets of 2 is the how. The mythos is that everybody is on a journey. Everyone's on an adventure. There are demons. There are trolls under the bridge. There are wrong paths, and you do have to go through the valley of death occasionally, and you walk through it, and that's just part of the process. And I think the lessons you learn in the field of play are so much easier than having to learn in life. I like the fact, parents disagree with me, but I want, when a mom says to me, "This is Billy's, the worst thing that ever happened to Billy, him dropping the ball in the end zone and us losing the game is the worst thing that ever happened to him." Well, what a lucky son of a bitch. Because he won't have to watch his child die in his arms.
Yep. Yeah.
In comparison.
Sure. Probably won't have to bury you, but I tell you, you burying him, that's going to be a pretty rough day.
Mm-hmm.
So you want the worst thing to ever happen in your life is when you're 16 years old with a guy like me and mom and dad in the stands and maybe a grandparent or two or three or four and aunts and uncles and a cadre of friends worthy the name. You know, you don't want to be 52 and floundering around and, you know, wondering about your health and how you're going to pay a bill. You want those life lessons, you know.
Yeah.
You want those, you know. I look back and we did this thing at the Olympic Training Center, and I know the piece of paper is here somewhere in my desk, but they asked us, and the sports psychologist said, "I'm really looking forward to yours, Danny." And it's because I was the oldest thrower, and I go, "Okay, so you had to write the best moments of your career." And you're only supposed to write 10, but every single one of us were at 18 or 23 before we even looked up. Because, you know, when you're an athlete, this is the best thing that ever happened. But this was really good too. Oh, this was great. I forgot about this one. And then the worst things ever happened in your life, in your athletic career or your life. And what's interesting is you could go like this to the worst, and it slid over to the best. Go to the second worst, slid over. Third worst. All the worst moments of your life led to your best moments. That's a wonderful life lesson, man.
Yeah.
And thank you. And I, by the way, did that, and he asked me to do it, so I did it with life. I did it with things in my life, highlights of my life, worst moments of my life, and it was the exact same again.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's a great opera, Karl Orff's Carmina Burana. No?
I'm not familiar with opera.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. One of them, the most famous song is a medieval monk's translation of The Wheel of Life. And there's a lot of people, it's called O Fortuna. And put it on.
Yes.
I guarantee you'll know it.
Okay.
I guarantee you'll know it when you hear it. But the idea is that if you decide to live on the rim of the wheel of life, you're going to have all these ups and downs. But the safe place to be is the hub. So you know, you're always, you know, there. And even though I agree with the wisdom of living in the moderate, the hub, there is value, and it's gonna happen sooner or later that you are gonna end up on the rim, and you're gonna have these tremendous highs, these tremendous lows. And I think that, and I think that's the great life lesson you pick up from sports. You know, overcoming a career-ending injury, a season-ending injury, the life lessons of showing up and rehabbing and, you know, being alone, you know, the dark nights of the soul. I think there's real value in those. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's pretty, I guess, impressive to see how there's so much overlap there between, you know, your interests in myth and religious studies and sport, and how really it's looking at life through a particular lens, and as opposed to them being, you know, sort of contradictory or binary concepts, they're very similar. And it even sort of resonates and speaks to how Sterner and I actually met in college. It wasn't through, we were in the same kinesiology program together, but that's not what actually caused us to become friends. It was by reading books and sharing. I think he first saw me reading The Fountainhead. We were working at the rec center during the summer, and said, "Oh, what are you reading there?" And then what actually really started from there was reading. We love fantasy books. You know, Harry Potter definitely was great to talk about a little bit. And the longest series that we really started to kind of read together, and then it turned into strength and conditioning and kinesiology and everything, was a series called The Wheel of Time.
Oh, okay. I kind of recommend a book it's harder to find now. It's a bit older. ESPN came up with a book called Saints, Sinners, and Saviors. It's looking at sports through the lens of religious studies. Okay. I kind of wish I wrote that book myself. But it's what's good about it is it's got the saviors, it's got the heroes, it's got good stuff about myth in there too, and legends and stuff. And it'd be worth your time. Yeah, I don't think I'm a very big believer in the great tradition of Western civilization, mind, spirit, body, soul, you know, and I'm not fragmented, I'm one. That's the way I see things, but, you know, I know that, you know, not everyone does that. one of my great workouts, favorite off training days, I tried it with a vest, a weight vest. Don't do it. Is you take a plastic bag and you take gloves and you go for a walk. And as you're walking, you pick up litter. I tried it once with a 60-pound weight vest. I could barely move for days. My lower back and the obliques, all those muscles that bend and twist. I wasn't hurt. I just felt like someone had taken on a baseball bat and just, gone around. But so for me, someone will ask, well, what does that got to do with conditioning? Oh, it's not just conditioning. That piece of garbage took away the beauty of that field. And by me picking it up, I made the world a better place today. Mm-hmm. It's not somebody else, it's me. But it's up to me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I really like that approach, and I will absolutely look into that book. I've been looking for another read lately, so that'll be on the list. Who's that by the way?
I don't know.
You know,
I think it's an edited collection.
Okay.
But I think Hunter S. Thompson writes the intro, if I'm right.
Really?
I think. I mean, I haven't seen it in a while. I've had to move. We had to move to California for a few years, and I donated the bulk of my collection. And I cannot believe how in 8 years I've ended up with even more books. So there you go.
I think that's the one thing where you can't collect too many clothes, T-shirts. Yeah, get rid of that. With books, I'd like to have a library someday.
Well, and it's interesting because I've had this a couple times, but I have all the strength and health. This is one of my favorite ones. This is the May 1964 edition, and it's interesting. I'll go back to these days, the pre-steroid articles often to get wisdom. No offense to a lot of our coaches, but a lot of our coaches couldn't coach without the use of anabolics and other PEDs. And it's nice to go back to find those coaches that didn't have them, also didn't have great facilities, also didn't have, mm-hmm. and see what their answer was. And then I take it and pour it into my great facilities, some real insights in nutrition. Even then they say, don't eat white sugar and white bread. But you go back and you look at these and you see these programs of 2 and 3 days a week training, everything's pretty reasonable. And you go, why did we get away from that? And so I always that's why I try real hard to be a lifting historian too.
That's good. I like that.
My wife and I donate to the Stark Center. That's at the University of Austin, where they have, the great collection of literally every. It's if you're a strength enthusiast, circle Austin, Texas on where to go next and go. It's in the University of Texas football stadium. So I try to miss a Saturday, but it is stunning. Tell Jan Todd, you're my friend, and go in and visit. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Kramer. Our advisor at UConn was Bill Kramer, and he had an entire section on the Stark Center, and I count myself lucky that was something that he placed such a big emphasis on. Standing on the shoulders of giants and realizing where the industry has come from to really understand where it's going, and the wisdom that is not even buried in the past, hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight. It was kind of a moment of my career of great. There'll be 2 things. I can't tell you the second one, but it's something coming up. But when they took me on a tour, Jan and her late husband Terry, they walked me in it's just this amazing library, and they stopped and they went like this. They kind of extend their hand, and it's my section.
Wow.
And it's like, where's mom and dad? That I'd love to have my folks see that moment. Yeah, so there's a little. I'm now scattered around all the books because they changed the thing a little bit, but it was quite a moment in my career.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. All right. Well, Bryce, you got anything else you want to wrap up with as we're coming up on time here?
Not too much besides it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. We absolutely appreciate it. Being able to meet and interact with someone who we've admired and respected from afar, and to be even more impressed by you in person than your articles has definitely been a great experience. So can't thank you enough for attending today.
And if you want to do it again, I think I'm pretty easy to work with, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, this was real easy. And I also have a whole page of notes from today. So if we ever take you up on that, I've got a bunch of follow-up questions that we can sort of hit the ground running with.
Let's just say yes, and later this week, let's just pick a date and let's do it again.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you everyone who is listening. And we will have our second episode with Dan John ASAP.
Thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you soon, Alex. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.